Yes. Okay. Peace and black power. Everybody that is tuned in. This is a, uh, a powerful. I could just feel it. It's a real transformative space to be in, and I'm honored. I'm thrilled just to share space, right? Even in a virtual space, to share space with you two brothers. Those who are tuned in, the audience members, you are in for a real powerful experience. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. This is COVID-19 and the prison industrial complex, a critical conversation. This is our first program within our slate of Black August programming that we are putting on. I am the political education director for the African Black Coalition, Makoni Tendaji. And let's go ahead and get straight to it. So with
Makoni, I think somebody named Jalen just said the link didn't work. I assume he's talking about the Zoom link.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll attend to that.
To resend the link to everybody who registered or something.
For sure, I'll do that. Thank you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce these two warriors that I have the honor of sharing this space with. First, Brother Yoel. This is a good brother who I've known for about 2 years now, or just under 2 years. I know him from his work with the African Black Coalition as a former political director. You can consider me as his shadow in a sense, sort of really following that legacy that he's built for us within the organization, just as a mighty African through and through. So that is Brother Yoel. Peace to you, brother. And then we also have Brother Abdullahi. This is a good brother who was just recently released after serving 14 years of a 17 to life sentence as a result of being found guilty of attempted murder at the age of 18 years old. Born and raised in Los Angeles, California, currently residing in Oakland, California. This brother spent the last 14 years educating himself and preparing to help and make amends to his community. Brother Abdullahi, it is an honor, a personal honor and a collective honor for sure to share space with you, good brother. So thank you to the both of you for tuning in to what is going to be very much so a critical and a thorough and a constructive conversation. Did either of you have any opening words that you wanted to share with us before I ask my first question?
Thank you for having us, brother, and welcome home, Brother Abdullahi.
Thank you, man. It's much appreciated, man. It feels like I won a Grammy. I always say that. So I just thank you for being able to be in this space, man, for all the people who deserve to be here that isn't able.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So let's go ahead and get straight to it, to the critical conversation of this program. So my first question, more of a give a description, right? This is for the both of you. So just describe some of the work that you have done related to the prison industrial complex, and share with us some of those significant experiences, memories, and lessons that you have gathered. Right. We'll start with Yoel, and then Brother Abdullahi. You can go ahead.
I'll cede the floor to Brother Abdullahi. He got a PhD in this stuff, man. Just barely an elementary student.
Well, first and foremost thing I would like to say is that I don't have a formal introduction or interaction with TD or the prison industrial complex, but I do have an intimate relationship with them, being that I was raised as an adult from childhood to adult or manhood inside of its institutions. And I think the first and foremost thing that I will convey to anybody about the prison industrial complex is that no matter how you look at it, how you shape it, how you form it, the prison industrial complex as it is today is horrible. And one of the primary reasons that it's horrible is, to give you a great example, is that when I first came to prison, I was introduced to the concept of systemic injustices or systemic racism or systemic oppression. And so I didn't really understand what that meant until I felt it, or was at the back end of the experience. And so what I mean by that is that if you look at the prison industrial complex, used to have 100 or more people dedicated to sincere work or to helping the inmates, to helping people incarcerated in their families, right? If they were all sincere, it would prohibit them or prevent them from being just in their affairs. They will continue to be oppressive because their job design, the procedures, and the policies that govern CDC is oppressive by its nature. It's dehumanizing by its nature. So even if you have the best and good-hearted people working inside the institution, unless they change their procedures and policies, it will still be oppressive place. The second thing, or the most critical thing that I learned about the prison industrial complex, specifically in California, is that it's a lot of resistance due to economic reasons. For example, a lot of prisons are put into towns where they literally have no economy, such as places like Blythe, California. We have Ironwood State Prison, or you have College State Prison in California, or a place like High Desert in Susanville, where their entire economy or a significant amount of the jobs for employment in those cities predicated on that, from being correctional officers, from secretaries to being administrative officials, to being teachers, to being kitchen workers. All their jobs are lucrative jobs as far as being state jobs and bringing benefits. So those people are primary people who are resistant to change inside of CDC, because it would destroy the economy in the way of and the comfort of the lifestyle that they were able to build through to the prison industrial complex. Okay, that's another one that you have to realize. And also another aspect of it in regards to big business is that one of the biggest things that you will fight against CDC and changing it is the the organized unions. For example, the correctional officers union is one of the most resistant people to change, because of how they refuse to relinquish it. And one of the primary ways that they utilize or harness this power is through fear and ignorance. So what they'll utilize videos from 1990s, early 80s, and make these videos as in the current status of CDC as it is today, which is quite frankly in majority of spots is not congruent in reality. And they'll predicate this fear to get promotions inside of the job and to keep people or keep the laws restrictive under the guise that this is what you call safety and security of the institution. And so this is how they draw in a lot of money. And to be truthful, one of the things that they fail to tell you is that it is economically more economically reasonable to rehabilitate the person than to utilize corrections. And how can I say this? For example, most people who work harder than the average officer, right? Because most of his job is done by other inmates doing the basic rudimentary things of his job. However, if you were to look at it from an economic perspective, it would be more responsible to rehabilitate the individual. Why? Because one, he will behave better inside of the institution. Secondly, the money that it costs to release a person on the streets worse than he came in. For example, if I come home after doing time in prison and treated, I come home more angry. I come home violent. And what do? I don't go to communities where these correctional officers live at. I don't go to communities where these teachers in these institutions live at. I go back to my raggedy community, and I'm your neighbor, and I'm tearing up your property. I'm ruining your car. I'm committing violence against your kids. And what does that do? That creates more economic problems, because you have to pay first responders such as police and doctors when I hurt people, or the medical people like the ambulances to pay for that. That's coming out of taxpayers' money. So then you do that, you have to send me to prison. And that's more taxpayers' money to keep me sustained inside the prison. You understand? And then secondly, after that, medical bills inside prison for keeping lifers for so long. And this is part of the reason why they're letting people out of prison. You keep me in there 30, 40, 50 years. The cost of my health care will increase as I get older, because now I have cancer. Now I have hepatitis C. Now I have AIDS, all these various things. And you have to pull on that money of the peers to pay those institutions. When you rehabilitate me while I'm in prison, you help transition me in prison, which makes my community safer, and it gives me a better opportunity of living. And from that point of view, it's easier for us to survive. It's economically more responsible for everybody if they were to take that position. So these are some of the things that I learned of living inside the CDC.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that. I had to mute myself because I'm over here banging on the keyboard, writing down literally everything you're saying. Much appreciated. Brother Yoel, did you have anything else to add on to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I appreciate the wisdom and the intimate knowledge our brother shared. For me, mostly it's been work on the outside. The first time I really got started to think about prisons and our folks inside prisons was in 2011. I don't know if people remember, but there was a hunger strike throughout California that started up in Pelican Bay.
Yes.
People opposing the SHU and like isolation and solitary and all the other things related to that. So that was really the first time like I started thinking about prisons and the function they serve in the society. And then I think the next year, this brother Troy Davis, who was innocent, got killed by, I believe, was the state of Georgia. There was like enough evidence to show that he was innocent. All the witnesses recanted, and there was pretty much all the evidence you could possibly need to actually exonerate somebody, and they still went ahead and murdered him. And that was kind of like the first time I really got to see, this thing doesn't really, it does something completely different what they say it's supposed to do. And so ever since then, we've been doing various work. In the 2014, 2015 time, the African Black Coalition, which is the statewide Black youth organization that we're here sharing the space with today. We led a campaign for a couple of years to divest from private prisons, and we're able to get the University of California system to divest $30 million from 2 private prison corporations. We were also able to get them to terminate a $500 million contract with Wells Fargo for the relationship Wells Fargo had with private prisons. And over the last year or so, I've been fortunate to be able to teach and fellowship and learn from our brothers inside San Quentin State Prison, which is where I met my brother Abdullahi. And it's just such a pleasure and an honor to have him free, to have him home. And we met in our like Black Studies class. It's the first time I went to teach, like maybe last year. And he was one of them sharpest students, man, come ready prepared with his books and readings. So it's just a blessing to have him come home and share his knowledge and wisdom with us today.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And then just to sort of add on, Yoel, describe for us just that whole experience in terms of, teaching a Black Studies course inside of these, facilities and what you gathered in terms of the significance of Black Studies in prisons, right? What the impact that was had, just sort of describe that for us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the importance of Black Studies as a discipline really cannot be overstated. On the outside, when I became a Black Studies major when I was in college, it was really the only major, the only discipline that really stimulated my mind, that taught me something that I just did not know at all. As an immigrant, as somebody who came here from the continent, and it played a significant role in my political development personally. And what was interesting is when me and my sister Elisa, who also serves in ABC, went in to teach their class, the program told us that they haven't had a Black Studies class in like 5 years. And we had to go through a bunch of hoops, but we were able to do it. And in our class, we had 35 students during a semester where every other class that was offered that semester had like a maximum of like 12, 13 students. And so we just, usually we were allowed about 15 students or so, and we can give or take like people from the wait list. And we just decided to add everybody from the wait list to the class, because here what we saw was just such a hunger for the brothers inside to really have a space to talk amongst ourselves about our history, about our material conditions, about what the solution to the problems we face are. And it was such an enriching experience. And and we learned more than we ever taught, probably. And maybe Brother Abdullah can say, like, you know, it was our first time going in to teach at San Quentin, so we didn't really have a sense of, like, you know, what the expectation was, or, you know, what people really got out of it, or if it was useful for them in any way. I think Abdullah can probably say more about that than I can, but for us, it was just a rewarding experience to be, you know, without, you know, we saw people in that class who've been incarcerated 40-something years, and I'm not even 30 yet, right? Like, people have been down since I was, like, born. And then we had people like Abdullah, who's like my peer, like we're almost the same age, right? He's a couple years older than me, but he's been there his entire adult life since 18. And then we got some brothers who just like started doing their bid there or something, but they were looking at a long time, right? So it was a surreal experience to literally go there and, like, you know, commune with brothers who are like your peers, your peers, and then your grandparents' peers, right? And it was just, you know, it was deeply, you know, I think personally it affected me in a lot of ways. And it really shows you, you know, if you really want to know the condition of Black people in this country, you know, you go to the ghettos, but you also need to go to the prisons. And that's what will really tell you, like, the material conditions of the masses of our people. You will get lessons that you won't get anywhere else.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that. So in the same vein, in terms of the significance of Black studies and you know, gaining that experience, right, in terms of witnessing, right, firsthand the impact that critical study can have. My next question would just be, what materials would you recommend to those who are tuned in and to those who will watch afterwards? What materials would you recommend to folks to study and, you know, critically read in order to develop that critical consciousness of mass incarceration and of the prison industrial complex, and just, like you said, well, how to properly analyze the material conditions, right, of the masses of our people, right? So to gain that information critically, right, what materials would you recommend?
Well, if I could go first, man, I think it's interesting that we're having this discussion during this month, you know, because one of the person that I'm gonna bring up lived about a couple of decades ago, and he died in San Quentin State Prison, which was George Jackson. Like, so, for example, the mentality of the correctional officers towards inmates, right, and their overall tactics, is you can generally see in the works of George Jackson, like Solid Brothers, Our Blood in My Eyes. So you want to understand the upbringing of African American or minority inside of the prison, I would definitely read those books. And although the conditions is not as severe as far as the violence is perpetuated via correctional officers or inmates towards inmates or inmates towards police officers as it was back then, the general intent and design and the intention towards correctional officers towards inmates is still very alive and well, and some of the tactics are still in place. So I would definitely go those two books. And it's also another book called The Melancholy History of Soledad, which is an extremely powerful book. I can't remember the author. Those are three primary books that I would suggest as far as the prison experience. Now, the injustices of the court systems, as we all know, the most famous and the most pivotal and monumental work on that, in those regards is still hands down is the book by the sister Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. And for a new re-envisioned idea of what corrections or rehabilitation as far as incarceration should look like in the future, I would definitely recommend the book by Angela Davis called Is Prison Obsolete? And so those would be my suggestions.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother. Yoel?
Yeah, I would say all those books. I would add this book called Maroon the Implacable, written by our brother, who's Brother Russell Maroon Shoatz, who has been in prison for, I think, over 4 decades. I think there's just plenty of writers, you know, books that are written by our brothers and elders who've been incarcerated for a long time, including Mumia and all our other political prisoners. You know, so I would say, you know, reading all of those books and and you know, I think also I haven't finished this book, but it's a book called "When We Locked Up Our Own" by James Foreman Jr. So something to check out, I think. But yeah, I would say those books for sure.
Yes, sir. And then just to kind of not go off track, but tying the significance, right, Brother Abdullahi, in terms of having this conversation during this time, right? This absolutely was intentional in terms of having a critical conversation about mass incarceration in the prison industrial complex, political prisoners, right? All these different things during the month of Black August, because it's one of the things that we are really trying to emphasize, not just in this month, but, you know, beyond, right, is the unique position that Black and African college students occupy, right? That's the primary base that the African Black Coalition organizes, right? And what I mean by the unique position is that when you look at just the basic and raw numbers in terms of where our people are, right, where they are positioned in society, right? Those of us who are on college campuses are a relatively small, right, percentage, right, of the mass population of African Black people, right? The greater percentage or the greater representation, right, would be, right, in correctional facilities and things like that, right? So where it becomes crucial is that for organizations that organize Black college students, right, we need to be clear that we are not doing what we're doing, right, only for us, right? And when I say only for us, I mean only for us as college students, or only for us as professionals, or only for us as whatever the case is, right? There needs to be a mass focus, right? And that comes from a critical study, right, of mass conditions, right? So I want to share just a brief quote from that book, right, from Blood in My Eye by George Jackson. I'll read it out loud, and then if I could just get Brother Abdullahi and Yoel, just your feedback in terms of what this statement sort of, how it resonates with you. So the quote goes, the purpose of the chief repressive institutions within the totalitarian capitalist state is clearly to discourage and prohibit certain activity, and the prohibitions are aimed at very distinctly defined sectors of the class and race sensitized society. The ultimate expression of law is not order, it's prison. I'll say it again because this is so heavy. Reading Blood in My Eye was one of the deepest experiences for me in my entire life, for sure. So I'll read it again, and then again, just what comes to your mind, right? What do you think about? What do you learn from this? So the purpose of the chief repressive institutions within the totalitarian capitalist state is clearly to discourage and prohibit certain activity, and the prohibitions are aimed at very distinctly defined sectors of the class and race sensitized society. The ultimate expression of law is not order, it's prison. So again, just from that excerpt, right? What do you gather from that? What's the message?
Man, that's interesting because it's a lot of things that you could read into it. You know what I mean? But the primary thing I would like to say in relation to prison and like people helping us, one of the greatest things that CDC did, which was actually like it's intellectually like it was amazing. Whoever orchestrated their plan to implement this idea, what they did was, and what the pandemic did was the opposite of that, which was expose them. So let me bring that full around. So the way they designed prisons was, once they realized not having prisons like San Quentin was terrible, because what San Quentin did was it made people be able to look and see that prison every single day, right? And so what it does, it was a part of their conscious, and it was part of their daily reality, because as you drive out that bridge, you see that prison, and you probably have family members inside that prison, which creates a yearning and a conscious thought of what's going on in that prison. How do we help those people, right? And what's interesting too is that one of the most rehabilitative prisons in California corrections is San Quentin, for that very same reason. You have little people who have access to this prison, and they can help these people, right? So that's the unique distinction of having a prison next to a full thriving city. Now, when you look at places like Calipatria State Prison, which is 14 hours here in the middle of nowhere next to Mexico, when you look at places like Black Tower, California, in the desert heat where nobody can see them, it does a lot of things. It discourages a lot of people. One, because the way corrections works is that they're very manipulative. For example, now it's called CDCR, right? Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. But the minimal spent money is on rehabilitation. What it did was say that I will open the door for a nonprofit organization to go to the minimum of nowhere to produce these rehabilitation programs, right? And that's very, when you're doing it coming out the goodness of your heart, out of your own pocket, out of your inner reservations, it's not going to be that great to go 14 hours away from my house to help these people, and you're not going to do it consistently, right? So this is some of the disruptive behavior that they do, or for families who love their loved ones, right? It's 14-hour drive. It costs money to take these plane tickets or these bus drives. It takes money to stay in these motels to go visit my homies. So it's disrupting those family connections. It's disrupting those rehabilitative connections. But also what it does too is that, hey, when you do graduate a class, right? I'm gonna come down there as the warden. I'm gonna take pictures with you saying that I'm a part of rehabilitation. But behind the scenes, right, informally, I'm telling you, you want to do this program, you want to do this program. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. So I'm pushing back and forth with you at every instant of thing to let you allow you to have this program, right? That you're supposed to be having to rehabilitate this man. And once you finally achieve all these hoops, if you still stay in there, I'm gonna come in at the last minute and I'm gonna take these pictures. And I'm gonna take credit for being that guy who rehabilitated this man. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I didn't push as hard as I could to prevent these individuals from being rehabilitated, because in the bottom line, this is an insecurity for my job, you know, because if we lessen prisons, that means it's a lot of group of people who are not going to be able to work and live on the comfortable life that they have already been lived. So for me, what he's calling to is that this system is meant to stop people from rehabilitating, to stop people from caring, to forget about these people being inside of these prisons and the way they're treated inside of these prisons by making them non-existent, by putting them out of the public conscience. And that's what some CDC excellently did. But what the pandemic, for me, which is an extra bit, the pandemic did is brought attention to CDC. And one of the primary things that it taught about CDC is that people think that the pandemic was just like administratively was a disaster, and it was, according to correctness. But that's not the only thing. It's a lot of things for centuries, for decades, where they administered horribly, and they were very negligent in day-to-day matters. But since we were not seen in publicly, because nobody sees these prisons, nobody's constantly aware of prisons, because we're not in the news every day. People are not talking to us constantly in a visible form every day, that these neglects been able to be overlooked for all these centuries. And so when I hear that statement, that's the understanding I come from. That's what I get from.
Yes, sir. Brother Yoel?
You know, for me, what especially the last line where he says the ultimate expression of law is not order, is prison. You know, it's kind of similar to you know, another expression that I've heard, which is that the law is not simply an arbiter of justice. It is, you know, it is simply an instrument for the powerful to govern the powerless, right? And what you know, Comrade George is really expressing is that in this society, the chief, you know, repressive institutions are the police and the prisons, right? They're the chief repressive institutions, and within this capitalist country, you know, under capitalism, you have the proletariat and you have the bourgeoisie, right? And within the proletariat, the entire function of the lower class or the working class, right, the workers, is able to produce capital for the landlords, right? And you know, during slavery, it was clear, you know, it was like that, you know, you kind of, it was clear who was what. And then you go into wage slavery, and it's like it becomes less clear. And in the present moment, where so much of the need labor has been automated, right? Like that, you have machines who can do the things that our people used to do all the time. Right. What we have is a surplus population, right? A surplus population of Black people for who, you know, the jobs that we used to do are automated, machines are doing them. There's less need for us. But the system itself, the capitalist system, has to figure out what to do with this population, because it has no intention of treating this population as human, as part of this society where with equal opportunities, equal resources, and all of that, right? And when when the system is with this reality, what it then turns to is its chief repressive institutions, which are the police and prisons. And the way we see that happen is, every 28 hours, a Black person gets murdered by the police. And that only accounts from, data from half of the police departments in this country, right? That you have in this country per capita and in raw numbers, the most prisoners in the entire world, right? And what it is doing is it's disappearing a class and race of people who are now just surplus population, right? And the instrument that they use to do that is, before they just come and lynch us because nothing was going to happen. Now that those times have changed, they do it differently, and the law becomes the new instrument to disappear a group and a class and a race of people, right? System no longer sees fit to exist. And so that's what I take from Brother George's words.
Man, hey, look, I try to tell people at the beginning. I said this is a powerful experience that we are, collectively embarking on, and it's very, very critical that we take the necessary time and the space and the energy, right, to challenge first ourselves, right, in terms of our analysis and our shaping of our world views, right, and then how do we get in the right position, right, to not only become the purveyors of knowledge and information, but how do we actually put that in the proper place to positively transform, right, the material conditions of the masses of our people. So final question, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. What advice would you give to organizations on how to work towards the betterment, right, of those of our people who are incarcerated and or system impacted, right? So just from your experiences, from your study, what have you identified as the best strategies and ways that people can not just help, right, but actually, get in proper position to really change things?
Yeah, sure. I would start with just just doing the work, right? The good thing, one thing that has changed, that has become a reality, these days, that probably didn't exist as much like 10 years ago, is that there's a lot of organizations and individuals of like formerly incarcerated people who've come home and are doing incredible work in working to end mass incarceration and really doing all the work that's necessary to free and liberate the people who are inside, but also to be able to serve the people who are just coming home. So I would say join those organizations and individuals in the work that they're doing and follow their lead, because they're the experts of their experiences. They're the experts of the system, really, in a way that none of us really are. They know it on all of its worst sides, and they can offer the solutions that work for them as the people who are primarily impacted by that system's existence. So I would say identify those people who are local to your area and follow their lead and work with them.
Yes, sir. But do you have anything else to share?
Well, I would like to just confirm what Yoel said. That's the most powerful thing he says, that the best thing that people could do is particularly join organizations as involved in reform work when it comes to prisons. But I would like to emphasize that the particular work that needs to be done in those organizations that they can help with is particularly to reform the policies and the laws that enter people into prison. And also what they can do is help challenge the laws and the policies within the prison. Because as it is now, that even though they say that they're supposed to be rehabilitation, the primary means and the top thing inside of CDC is safety and security. And there's a lot of oppressive measures that they utilize in the name of safety and security. And so those things are prohibitive, are disruptive to real rehabilitation work. So I would definitely enjoy organizations and particularly work on those two things. Now, one of the things that I battle internally every day is the idea of unions, because they have been such a critical and pivotal group of organizations that allow real change, specifically in the business sector, right, and in the labor sector. However, my experience with CDC, one of the worst things that they ever created, and the evil that I've seen from unions was in biggest way in changing and reforming industrial complex is unions. So one of the things that I always debated is, should we eradicate unions to eradicate these people from keeping people inside of prisons, right? And that's another thing. And the second thing that I would like to highly encourage is that people be the voice and conscience of people in prison, because it's easy for us to be forgotten. And a lot of times we're over neglected because we're so far away. We're a part of society that people don't have to face, their conscience don't have to face every day. So to be able to be a face and a voice of conscience for us, but also to dispel the ignorance, because a lot of stuff that people, these groups use to manipulate the people or to deceive the people is to say that we're these monsters. So to humanize us by giving us platforms and conveying that we had the same hopes and aspirations as everybody else, although we might have took some made some drastic decisions and actions that was contrary to normal society, and to give it and to humanize us in a way that they'll be able to accept us or be willing to put up less resistance of having us back into the side of society. And so those are the things that I would highly suggest.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. So now, with the remaining about 15 minutes or so that we have, this will be the time for Q&A. So those who are tuned in, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please put them in the chat, and then I'll read them out to our speakers here. And while people insert their questions, I wanted to ask a follow-up, and this is this is all part of the ancestral timing of it all, right? So from the time of the start, right, of Black August, the start of the month to now, a very interesting development from my perspective, right, would be the Democratic presidential ticket that we have, right? So you have Joe Biden, who's the president, right, and he picked Kamala Harris as his vice presidential candidate, right? And again, the reason why this is an interesting development, right, is because I had questions, prepared for you all, or for the both of you, and then we get hit with this, right? So I don't know how to phrase my question. I guess I would just ask, right, how do you interpret that, right? So let's start with Brother Yoel, right? So just with this sort of development in terms of electoral politics, right? You have the architect, right, of the 1994 crime bill, then you have the self-proclaimed, right, top cop Kamala Harris, right, who are in the position to run and potentially become, right, the most powerful people in the country, right? So how would you interpret all that?
I was really not hoping to say something because, I ain't got nothing nice to say. George Jackson talks a lot, and, I'm glad we're talking about him because yesterday, on the 21st, was the anniversary of his assassination by our enemies. One of the things he talks a lot about in both of his books, especially I think in Blood in My Eyes, how electoral politics is just like a circus. It's like there's a function it serves in aiding and abetting the empire to continue as it is, right? One thing that's been interesting to me, right, is that the kind of hoops and like jumps that people have been making in trying to make Kamala and Biden, they're the second coming of like Jesus, that, they're this, they're that, Joe cares and Joe's decent and Joe's this, Joe's that. I think there's two conversations, right, in seriousness. Right? One is Trump is a fascist and he's doing enormous, like unthinkable damage uh, to our people, to all people. I mean, it's incredible the kind of shit that they're doing, right? And for that reason, like it's better to have somebody less evil than somebody who is like a little bit more evil, well, a lot more evil, really. But there's a way like election can be a harm reduction strategy, right? And that like in some facets of our lives, less harm will visit us, right? Than like if the Democrats win, than Trump being in power, right? Like simply means like there's a knife 9 inches in my back, like Malcolm says, and maybe now it's like 6 inches in my back or 3 inches in my back, right? And but that still is like significant enough difference that like to engage in this process somehow, some way, right? I think the thing that I have been really like disappointed by is the fact that it was under Obama that like the most drones got sent and murdered like people in Africa and everywhere in the third world. It was under Obama that like the Black Lives Matter movement in its current iteration happened, right? And a sitting black president did nothing, right? It was under Obama that the most number of immigrants got deported than any other, all the presidents before him combined together, right? So I think that like there's a level of dishonesty I see with a lot of people, like why they're voting for Biden and Trump. I mean Biden and Kamala, right? And I find that disappointing because I think that we can be sincere and honest and say, electing Biden, like the architect of the mass incarceration bill, and Kamala Harris, who literally, when she was Attorney General, argued against the release of people from state prisons because it was going to reduce the labor pool, right? The people who work for free, right? Talking about prison as like slavery by another name, right? That her office refused under her name to look at DNA evidence against somebody who was innocent, who was sitting on death row, right? Like these are things that have happened in her seat, and you can dress up things differently, but I think that we can be honest and truthful about both of these people's records, and we can also say at the same time, like having them is like maybe 5 inches like shorter knife, but the fundamental problem that we have to deal with is that there's a knife in our back, whether it's 6 or 9 inches at the end of the day. You got to get rid of that knife. You got to heal that knife, like that knife wound, and then you got to use that knife to take care of the people who in your back in the first place, so that they don't do it to you and your people again, right? And so I would say, I think that's like the kind of nuanced conversation that I think we should have.
Brother Abdullahi, anything to add to that?
Well, there's very little that I actually can answer that. However, I would say that we missed the boat, man. And for me, what I mean by missing the boat is that Bernie Sanders was our man. If you wanted to see real political social change, I thought Bernie Sanders was the person to back behind, because he was a grassroots. His movement was a grassroots movement, and it was not a part of the major central political structure. Whether you get Kamala Harris or Biden, or you get Trump, it's still all part of the same program, which is big business. I'm a big high fan of Noam Chomsky, and so all those people cater to those businesses, and they actually benefit from those businesses. Because one, they either are part of those businesses or have some association, or they're going to benefit through their lobbying and their money. And so, unless we can get away from those type of people, those Main Street people that are politics, then we're gonna have the same situation. Because it's an Islamic fundamental thing is that as you are, so the people over you. You know what I mean? And one of the interesting things about that is how he's just being intellectually curious. Like he put Kamala Harris probably because he thought that it would cater to the people, one, to black people, to the women, which is the same old politics as usual. You know what I'm saying? And so the thing is that we have to and people probably did cater to that. You know what I'm saying? And what we have to realize is that we have to get from those. We have to go to people who truly represent the politics that's going to benefit us. And they're not the people that's been playing in this thing for the past 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years. So we have to look for new and fresh people to be able to voice our legitimacy and support them wholeheartedly. You know, and that's just my opinion.
Right. Yes, sir. Thank you. I just had to throw that in there, right? I was thinking about it, and I'm like, oh snap! Like we could for sure talk about that for a little bit at least, right? So thank you for your input on that. And so now, just a couple of questions from our audience. One that I definitely want to ask is, we talked about advice in terms of how people can get involved, how people can help, right? Can the both of you or either of you list some of those organizations that you may know by name that are doing that work, right? And then I can like compile them in a list and put them in the chat, just so people can like look them up themselves and find out how to get involved.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go over one that's a grassroots in a real way. It's a brother by the name of Adnan Khan, who I served time with in San Quentin State Prison. He helped create a group called Restore Justice. Restore Justice is one of the most progressive and aggressive groups and organizations committed to reform policies and change inside of CC, inside of it and outside of it. And so that's where I will put my back in at Restore Justice.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, brother. Billy, Yoel, did you have any?
I'm just typing them up, but yeah, all of us or none, I echo Restore Justice. There's an organization called Initiate Justice that's been working a lot on even getting the right of people to vote. But I would say really just look into the local organizations that are working on criminal justice and working to end mass incarceration, and you'll find them there.
Definitely. And what I would also add, when it comes to those of us who maybe are looking to join an organization, right, or are just starting, studying and reading and things like that, I think it's crucial that regardless of where you may find yourself geographically, right, be sure that that the organization that you're looking into, at the very least, have a particular position or a stance when it comes to supporting or organizing resources for those of our people who are incarcerated or system impacted, right, rather than just looking for one organization that does just that, right? Because what happens is we don't need a whole bunch of organizations that all do one thing, right? If we can sort of consolidate and establish strong organizations that have multiple lanes of focus, right, and resources and opportunities and access and things like that, right? So if you approach, a notable organization in your community and say, hey, work is being done, to help our brothers and sisters in prisons, and they go, oh, we don't do that. The question should be asked, why not, right? What are they not Black people too? Like when it comes to this whole, right, this whole sort of outcry in terms of our lives mattering and all these different things, we need to be sure that we are being clear that if we're gonna take to the streets and march and say Black Lives Matter, we're not being selective, right? We're not saying, oh, I didn't even think about people in prisons. Why not? You should, right? They're your people too, right? So that is critical, right, in terms of how to find those organizations that do that kind of work. Another question here, it says, how do we put restorative justice into practice, and what are some of the alternatives for the future for our youth instead of prison? So if we could hit that restorative justice piece. So when it comes to the issue of the prison industrial complex, right, what has been the role, right, from either of your experiences or perspectives, what has been the role of restorative justice?
So let me make sure I understand this question right. What's the role of Restore Justice in relation to youth, children?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. So for example, for me, I started going into criminal institutions at the age of maybe 15, 16, when I was first introduced to a juvenile facility. And that was a long time ago. Obviously, that was almost 19 years ago. However, from what I understand, I had done some work as far as Restore Justice in prison. Like I actually was part of a group called Squires, which brings youth inside the prison to hear our stories. And also did another one in regards to kids that's incarcerated inside of YAs and having dialogues with them about prison. But I think the primary concern is that people the government particularly don't invest enough money inside of it. What they do is they find any groups, and this is the fear too, is that the nonprofit restorative justice is big money for a lot of nonprofit organizations who see this as a scheme, a get rich, get clean, that I can come and get some donations, I can some tax write-off, I could set up a couple of computers, or I could set up a venue where I have some little packets and I explain it as a drug counselor, alcohol counselor, but in my real intent is not about rescuing the lives of these kids, right? And so one of the biggest things is that the government needs to organize or help, or we need to, as a group of people, as individuals, independent of them, we need to have grassroots organizations committed to the care and love of these kids, right? And it has to be before they come to prison and during their stay inside of rehabilitation. And as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen any real group do that adequately. And I'm somewhat out the loop, but a lot of them don't do it adequately to the point where they're out there on the streets helping these kids out. For example, for me, the best people that did it, and I'm not a part of the Nation of Islam, that was the best alternative that we had inside of the ghettos where I came from. So we need to have other legitimate people, organizations inside our communities that have a strong care for kids. And that's pretty much all I can say about it. I'm really lacking in knowledge as far as what's going on the streets in relation to kids and restorative justice. But from what I understand, it's very little.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother. Brother Yoel?
Great.
For sure. Appreciate that. So that is 8 o'clock right on the dot. Man, thank you to you, Brother Yoel. Thank you to you, Brother Abdullahi. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Again, this was a promise to be a powerful experience, and I'm sure that it was. It has been a true honor to share this space with both of you, good brothers, as well as with everyone who has tuned in. By no means is this the sort of open and closed book on the conversation, right? We didn't. We certainly have a lot more work in front of us, right, to get to, and we intend to do so. Did either of you want to leave us with any final words?
All power to the people.
All power to the people, yes, sir. We can definitely end it with that. Again, I am the political education director for the African Black Coalition. This has been a critical conversation, COVID-19 and the prison industrial complex, the first program in our Black August programming. Again, thank you very much to you, Brother Yoel, and to you, Brother Abdullahi. It was a privilege and an honor to share space with you. And then for those of us who are tuned in, stay tapped into our Black August programming that we have coming up. Next weekend, we're doing some hard teaching on some topics, right? Protecting Black children. We're actually having a teaching webinar on Mumia Abu Jamal. We're also having one on Afro-Caribbean women and resistance. So, we're thorough in our political education as the African Black Coalition, certainly. So with that, I'll say, as Brother Yoel said so eloquently, all power to the people. Everyone stay safe. Peace and Black power.